In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, State of Florida versus Caylee Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 6. We, the jury, find the defendant We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict is to count 7. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson.
Madam Clerk, you may poll the jury.
Yes. Juror number 1, were these your true and correct verdicts? Pardon? Juror number 1, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Not guilty.
Were they all your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 2, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 3, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 4, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 5, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 6, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 7, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 8, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 10, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 11, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
And juror number 12, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Will counsel and the defendant approach the podium? Not all the counsel, but just representative sample. Caylee Anthony, the jury of your peers, having found you not guilty as to the charge contained in count 1 of the indictment, murder in the first degree, at this time, I will adjudge you to be not guilty. As to count 2, the crime of aggravated child abuse, a jury of your peers having found you to be not guilty, the court will adjudge you to be not guilty of the crime contained in count 2. As to count 3, aggravated manslaughter of a child, a jury of your peers having you
The bottom line is that,
Look,
sure.
I want to hear what the judge is going to say here.
sentencing Thursday at 9 a.m. in this courtroom.
All right, he's
Thursday
telling the lawyers, in Caylee Anthony, sentencing will be Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So essentially, Jay, she was found guilty of 4 misdemeanor charges. Each count carries about a year. She's served 3 years, so could she get just another year behind bars, plus time served?
Well, the judge could absolutely just let her go home. She was found guilty, as you said, of 4 misdemeanors. They each carry a year. If the judge wanted to, he could run those consecutive, so her maximum penalty would be 4 years, and that is not in prison because she's not been convicted of a felony. So that would be 4 years in the local jail, and if the judge gave her those 4 years with credit time, she'd probably have little to no time left. So he could simply say, you're free to go.
And I had wondered, showing some tears, showing some emotion.
And I wondered if they weren't inclined to plead straight up to those counts because she was clearly guilty on those 4. They didn't even argue them very strenuously, but maybe they wanted the jury to check guilty on something, and this gave them the ability to convict her for something because they knew she did something wrong, but not the greater charges.
And obviously, we'd have to sit back and say, okay, they deliberated for 10 hours, which means they were thoughtful, but the consensus had to be there was some reasonable doubt. Let me ask back in the booth. Ebony, are we equipped to bring our other legal analysts in on this conversation, even though they wanted a place to sit? Yes or no? I need to know if we can accommodate their mics.
What that sacrifice would be.
Well, I'm just going to bring them on in. John, why don't you come on in, and sir, you come in too. A couple of other legal analysts are
John
joining
Phillips?
us here.
Thank you for being here today. All right.
And you are? Richard Kurtz. Hey, Richard.
And Richard
Thank you
Kurtz.
for being here.
John Phillips and Richard Kurtz.
Richard, let me get your take. You were standing there. You watched the verdict being read. What did you think?
I wasn't surprised at all. I really was not surprised. My only thought and concern was going to be they were going to compromise and come back with a second, because clearly there was never
I would
able to
also
prove an
wish
intent
to
element
advise
that's
you of
required
some
in
very
first. So
special
I'm actually not
privileges
surprised.
enjoyed.
And John Phillips?
Contrarily, I was surprised. I really thought that it's too soon for a murder 1, but I really thought they'd bring it down, and they threw acquittal and murder 1 off the table, and they found something in the middle. The fact that she could be walking free at the end of the week is truly surprising. If they run those sentences concurrent, she's done more than her time.
Well, Jay, let me ask you. I know a lot of people sat back and they said after the we're going to listen to the courtroom here for a second.
Therefore, the law gives you a unique privilege not to speak about your jury work. Although
Checking to see is if he remands her to custody, they are going to fingerprint her, or sets bond, or sets her free.
Richard John Phillips. My pleasure.
No, that name. Obviously, there's 2 John Phillips.
this court is in recess.
Okay, court is in recess, so no more proceedings as of this morning. So I assume this means that Caylee Anthony, for now, will go back to her cell in isolation?
Remain in custody until...
If the judge hadn't specifically said you're free to go, then she's not free to go. It depends upon the bond situation. We don't know, and maybe someone else does. If the charges that she was found not guilty of, she's free to go on those charges. Obviously, she's been found not guilty.
Can we read anything into the fact that there's so many people that have access to her right now and she's not surrounded by sheriff's deputies?
That's a good point. Yes. Because those bonds fell away, so it would be left with those 4 counts. She might have been released on her own recognizance already on those because they didn't think she'd go anywhere.
In other words, before we ever started, there may have been an ROR, release on your own recognizance, that was set on those charges. If that's the case, then she's free to go.
Because the murder carried no bond, they probably didn't bother to put a monetary bond on those
But
counts.
they said they're going to fingerprint her.
Right.
Number one, I assume that her fingerprints are already on file, but they'd have to fingerprint her as somebody who's been adjudicated guilty?
Exactly.
Well, there's actually a piece of paper that's a judgment. In this case, it'll be a judgment conviction on a misdemeanor, and you put your fingerprint on there so that in the future, they'll know that's her.
Look, it appears the sheriff's deputy, okay, they're going to go through the process of fingerprinting her. We're going to stay with these pictures. One of the clues will be if they do handcuff Caylee Anthony and escort her out of the courtroom, we'll know that she's still in custody. If she walks free, then it tells us something else. Jay, before the judge recessed, I was asking verdict being read. What did you think?
I wasn't surprised at all. I really was not surprised. My only thought and concern was going to be they were going to compromise and come back with a second, because clearly there was never able to prove an intent element that's required in the first. So I'm actually not surprised.
And John Phillips?
Contrarily, I was surprised. I really thought that it's too soon for a murder one, but I really thought they'd bring it down, and they threw acquittal or murder one off the table, and they found something in the middle. The fact that she could be walking free at the end of the week is truly surprising. If they run those sentences concurrent, she's done more than her time.
Well, Jay, let me ask you. I know a lot of people sat back and they said after the we're going to listen to the courtroom here for a second.
Therefore, the law gives you a unique privilege not to speak about your jury work. Although you are at liberty to speak with anyone about your deliberations, you are also at liberty to refuse to speak to anyone. A request to discuss either your verdict or your deliberations may come from those who are simply curious or from those who might seek to find fault with you. From the media, from attorneys, or elsewhere, it will be up to you to decide whether to preserve your privacy as jurors. Again, thank you. You're hereby discharged, and I will see you shortly back in the jury room. Thank you.
Where?
One of the things we're checking to see is if he remands her to custody, they are going to fingerprint her, or sets bond, or sets her free.
Richard John Phillips. My pleasure.
Know that name. Obviously, there's two John Phillips.
Court is in recess.
Okay, court is in recess, so no more proceedings as of this morning. So I assume this means that Caylee Anthony, for now, will go back to her cell. Obviously,
the defense tried to say that maybe George had a motive. So I guess the jury just waded through all that. And maybe as lawyers, we think that what we say is a little more compelling than what it is.
We're looking at some, exactly.
Well, I mean, again, it's the state that has the burden of proof. Right. So if there's a doubt, it's going to go in the favor of the defense.
Let's go to Bruce now, who is with our other analysts, and taking a look at some pictures, some rare pictures of Caylee Anthony now during this trial, during this phase. Amazing smiles, and just looks like everything has fallen away from this individual.
Well, let's not forget the fact that she was found guilty of 4 misdemeanor charges. What we're waiting to find out is whether or not she is going to be remanded back to custody. The fingerprinting process continues right now. There could have been what Jay explained to you before as an ROR, released on her own recognizance, if a first-degree or second-degree murder conviction wasn't handed down. We'll know whether or not she's going back to jail or wins that ROR based on the way she leaves the courtroom. If the deputies come up and handcuff her, she is going back behind bars pending the sentencing hearing on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. Let's go back to our other analysts, Richard and John. Richard, you're John Ashton. You're the prosecution. Obviously, Baez is happy as all get out. But what do you think about the prosecution? What's going through their mind right now?
Well, the thing about when you lose a case, you actually learn so much more from your losses than you're ever going to learn from your wins. So I'm sure he's absolutely racking his brain going through and deciding what did he do wrong, what could he have done different, what would he have changed if he had to do it all over again.
And John, if you were to analyze what went wrong, what would you say it was? To
the exclusion of any reasonable doubt. They just didn't prove that high of a standard. There was stacking of inferences and circumstantial evidence everywhere. And Caylee Anthony appeared dirty. She appeared to have done this or had been involved with this, but there was no linking of her DNA or her fingerprints or her actually committing this crime or disposing the body, and I think that's where they missed that link.
And basically the jury looked at her and said, okay, you know what, Caylee Anthony, we don't think you're sympathetic, we don't think you were a very good mother, we think you lied to the cops, but we don't know about anything else. All right, she's being escorted out of the courtroom, but not in handcuffs, so?
Release on recognizance. She's probably free until Thursday by all signs, and as we set up on stage, there's a very likelihood that these charges either can run consecutive, meaning one after the other, or concurrent, meaning they ran all together. And the fact she's been in jail for all this time, she may be hitting Orlando at the end of the week, although she may want to get out of town.
Well, let's poll our panel of lawyers here right now. Sentencing happens on Thursday morning. She's served 3 years already. John, I'm going to start with you, then we'll go to Richard, then we'll go back to the other studio to Jay and Janet. Does she get credit for time served, or does he slap another year on for each of the misdemeanor charges?
She'll get credit for time served regardless. It's just whether those other charges add up and keep her in jail. But I think she's done.
Richard, do you think she sees any more jail time?
No, she's absolutely done. The question is she going home right now, or are they going to have to process her back to the jail just as a procedural matter? But if she's not going home right now, she's going home Thursday afternoon.
Mary, why don't you see if Jay and Janet want to weigh in on that?
Absolutely. We want to know, is she going to see any more jail time?
I would predict no. I mean, she may have a little bit more time left, but if you're looking at another couple of months in jail, I mean, even if you looked at it from a fiscal perspective, the judge could simply say, we've housed this woman long enough. She's been found not guilty. The jury has spoken. I'm going to honor the wishes of this jury and say that 3 years is enough on the misdemeanor she's been convicted of.
What do you think, Janet?
I think he might max her out just because of what she was facing, and, you know, another year compared to death or life, I think it might send a message, and he might do it.
You brought up a really good point. We aren't seeing Cindy or George Anthony in these pictures at all. They would have had access to come up and give their daughter a hug.
Well, Jay and I both noticed that at the same time because we've been in enough trials where the first people who come up, they hug the lawyers.
It would be the family,
It's the
correct?
family. And it's an awkward situation how this family heals after this, because it appeared as if Cindy might be more sympathetic to her. George did not seem sympathetic. There have been horrible allegations. You know, how they go home together. I think Jay even said if she got a bond, who would post it? Would her parents get her out of jail at this point?
It'll be curious.
I think the entire world would agree on beyond a reasonable doubt that this is a very dysfunctional family, and there's no reason to think that all of a sudden they're going to be all fine and dandy and life is good. They're going to have their own thoughts, their own traditions, their own fears as to what goes forward and what really happened.
A lot of counseling, probably, right?
And I think that would be an under...
But I don't have high hopes for this family ever to pull it together.
Yes, Bruce?
Yeah, I think, you know, this family doesn't have a very optimistic future. There's a lot of water under the bridge. You know what? This is a story that has been followed worldwide. It's been posted, a subject on Twitter, on Facebook, social media, pundits weighing in from around the world. So what do the people here in our backyard think? Channel 4's Scott Johnson's in San Marco right now. What do the pulse of the people say, Scott?
Yeah, well, Bruce, people have been sitting in restaurants like the Mudville Grill here just glued to this. It's like a major sporting event. Most of the TVs in there glued to this. All eyes watching it. I saw one woman watching this intently, staring at it, minute after minute, until the judge was about to read the decision. She looked flustered, got up, and left. I don't know if she could bring herself to hear it. As I watched the different decisions come down, like the first-degree murder, the aggravated child abuse, the aggravated manslaughter, when she was found not guilty, I heard some people at one end of the bar go, no! Other people on the other end of the bar say, I knew it all along. So a very divided opinion of the public watching this, millions watching this so closely, right up the street from us. Live in San Marcos, Scott Johnson, Channel 4, the local station.
By the way, if you'd like to weigh in, I know that Ashley Townsend is standing by right now. You can do so if you go to newsforjax.com and click on the conversation room. It's a chance for you to give us your feedback. You can also do it on my Facebook page, WJXT for Bruce Hamilton, the morning show page, or the local station page. Everybody's going to have a differing opinion. I asked you what you thought was going through John Ashton's mind, what went wrong. Jose Baez, he is a lawyer with not a lot of experience. Is he going to sit back and say, I'm going to write a book, Richard?
I think there's a real possibility. Obviously, there were so many things that happened in this case that are very intriguing and very unique, and people would want to know what was really going on behind the scenes. What was she really thinking? What was she really feeling? And did he really think this was going to be possible?
And John, I think we also, I said this before, but we also have to reiterate, just because a jury finds somebody not guilty, it doesn't mean they think that that person is innocent.
The state didn't prove it. The state didn't prove that she killed Caylee, or that she abused Caylee, and I'm still a little speechless about it. But yeah, Jose Baez is the happiest guy in the state of Florida today.
Now, I can tell you that, can we take you inside the courtroom right now? There's a room that's been set up where the jury is going to speak. Had they handed down a first-degree murder conviction, of course, they would have remained anonymous at this point through the sentencing phase. They would tender their recommendation to the judge. Then it's actually Judge Delvin Perry who would decide whether or not it's life or death. But given the fact that there are only 4 misdemeanor charges where they leveled a guilty verdict, they can go public. They can talk about why they made the decision they did, and you can see that they're staging there right now to go ahead and do that. And Mary, let's bring Jay and Janet back into the fold and ask them what we expect to hear from those jurors.
Exactly. We're wondering what the jurors will bring forward. Those who do choose, it's their right to be able to choose to approach the microphone, correct? And why, what would possess a juror to do that, first of all, and what would we be hearing?
Well, you heard the judge gave an elaborate instruction, which is a standard instruction under Florida law that tells the jurors they have the absolute right. There are rare circumstances that I could touch on where the judge can sort of compel them to talk, but generally they have the absolute right to not speak. And lawyers, of course, are forbidden from going and trying to speak to jurors even after the case. It's the juror that has to initiate the contact. So if a juror decides, you know, I want to talk to someone, they're absolutely free to do that. I think most lawyers that have been trying cases for a long time have had jurors contact them after trials, and it's actually an invaluable resource for a lawyer to talk to a juror after a trial, but it's up to the juror as to what they want to do.
And Janet?
I was thinking maybe the foreman, you know, at this point the foreperson has the authority of the whole group. Maybe that person would get up and just, you know, give a statement for the whole group so they don't get bothered on the way out of the courthouse. And, you know, nobody can approach them, but maybe they just want to get it out there. Here's what we did. You know, we followed the law, and, you know, that's it.
Do you expect any of them individually, though, not the foreman, to come forward and want to share this?
I wouldn't think right now. I would think the foreperson would want to maybe speak for the group, because at this point they've spent 2 days kind of representing that group, and the foreperson usually takes it really seriously, and maybe they'll get up and give a statement that they all might even agree on. But to have them all come up one at a time, I think they'll trickle out with their stories in the next few days, but they're probably shaken up right now too.
Exactly.
They want to see their families. Let's not forget about that.
No doubt about that. Their lives have certainly been shaken up. Let's check in with Jim Piggott, who's downtown polling some of the people in the center of our city as to what they think. Jim?
You know, Mary, shocking for the local station.
All right, Jim, let's take you back inside the courtroom where it looks like there's something happening where the jury is about to be seated. I imagine you can see them waiting for the... Okay, let's listen right now.
My name is... And
challenges for all of us in the criminal justice system and the media that justice for Casey and Caylee was what it was all about. That Casey did not murder Caylee, her little daughter. And interesting, a perfect example, he said, of why the death penalty does not work. Very powerful words there.
Yeah, I mean, the tone of you don't celebrate after a verdict like this because there is a dead baby, and I think that was an incredibly appropriate tone to take on either side. You see people celebrate sometimes after verdicts, and it's a little disconcerting. Yeah, it's not appropriate. And he was so appropriate. Then he took it to the next level, and I was thinking this in his closing. He's a true believer. I mean, this isn't a guy who's just doing it for a buck. I think it's a cause for him, and there's some defense attorneys that do it for money, and there's some defense attorneys who do it because it's their passion and their cause. Clearly, this is his cause.
Seem very sincere.
Yes.
I mean, I know what you're saying. A lot of times we question, whoa, really? Right. Could you really support that? Right. Jay, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I thought Mr. Baez was appropriate in his statements, but, you know, let's talk about this for a minute. This is his moment in the sun.
Sure.
You know, and he worked hard, give him credit for that, and he was victorious, and he'll use that. Let's not doubt that. You can argue about whether he has the right to, maybe he does, but he will use it. But his statements were very appropriate. I thought he had the right tone. His partner, on the other hand, I thought came out and was... attacking the media, and I could agree that it's not appropriate.
Rightfully so in some cases, that's for sure.
There's certainly a problem in this country where people get up, especially in these criminal cases, and start talking about stuff they don't know anything about.
Look at this, Jay, and Janet, this is outside the courthouse right there. Talk about the circus.
Well, in that Suburban Drive address, they were apparently camped out at the home of the Anthonys. I don't know how anyone goes home now.
No.
And this is the dilemma that we have, and it's why what we have to do is we have to have confidence in the system, because you have people in that audience right now, in that crowd, that are saying that this woman is guilty and a murderer went free, and there's other people in there that are saying, well, okay, she was found not guilty. We need to know who killed this child. We need to know the truth. And the truth is that this woman went to trial and was found not guilty because the state couldn't prove its case.
And you're right, everyone has a very strong opinion. Let's get to Ashley Townsend, who is standing by with reaction from the social media world. Everyone is out there, I'm sure, Ashley, speaking up.
Of course, yeah.
This afternoon.
Well, and about Caylee, I'm actually going to keep what I would really love to say to myself because it's not so nice. That's what Hilda has to say. We also heard from another of our viewer. Her name is Sherry, and she says, again, kind of discussing how there wasn't really any hard evidence. So a lot of feedback here on the World Wide Web.
Thank you, Ashley. You know, looking at those, you even had reactions to what people are saying, and it's kind of, it's pretty harsh.
Well, and I think the system is the system. Whether you get the verdict you want or you get the verdict you didn't want, that jury did its job, and we have to respect that. I mean, Jay and I have both been on both sides where we agreed and we disagreed, but they took it seriously, and those are the people you live and die by. You have to trust that what they did was right.
You have to respect the system even if you're not happy with the verdict. This is the United States. Mr. Baez pointed to the 4th of July. People have died so that people have the right to come be tried by juries of their peers. Maybe we don't like the results, but we like the system and we have to respect it.
And as Jose Baez pointed out, we still have, there's a dead child.
Exactly.
And this is a case that, you know, what happens next?
Well, what Mr. Baez said is something that I've said frequently, and that is, in a case like this, there are no winners. A family, to whatever extent it was together, is certainly torn apart now. Most significantly, a young, beautiful baby is not with us anymore. She's been taken from us. There really is no next step. That's the problem. People are going to be left with this feeling of what do we do next? What happens next? Is there another trial? Well, this isn't Russia. In Russia, maybe there's another trial. There is no next step. The next step is she'll be sentenced to whatever she's going to be sentenced to on those misdemeanors. Unfortunately, there'll be another murder trial tomorrow, but fortunately, we'll still have a system to do it the right way and hopefully have verdicts that the country can have confidence in because the system worked.
Our reporter down in Orlando had said that the sheriff was there, the under-sheriff, scores of deputies. You know, that's a kind of a rare situation. Is she in any danger? Was she being, you know, have to kind of watch?
Well, based on what these people are blogging, and I think maybe that's what Cheney Mason said. I mean, it's a little hard not to take it personally because we're lawyers on TV talking about the case. I don't think we've been judgmental or harsh about it, but maybe his point is this whole justice for Caylee. And he made a point of saying the justice system is also to protect Casey. The victim, the defendant, the state, and the defense, they all get the benefit of the system. And maybe people were worked up into a frenzy, and Jay makes a great point. There won't be closure for a lot of people on this, and sometimes you don't get the answers.
Interesting to see what the after effects are.
Yes.
Let's listen into the verdict once again as it was announced at 2:15 this afternoon.
As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3. We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. So say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 6. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict is to count 7. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson.
So after the clerk read the verdicts themselves, the judge went ahead and polled the jurors to make sure that their decision was unanimous. They assured him it was, and then shortly thereafter they held a news conference. I was a little surprised that they identified themselves, but the forewoman seemed to make it evident that they were confident in the decision they reached. And I know that there are people out there, because I was reading some of the comments on Facebook and Twitter and online, people are going to say, you know what, the system doesn't work. Others are going to sit back and they're going to say, you know what, the system did exactly what it was supposed to because there was reasonable doubt. And I think people have to understand it's not a perfect system, but it's the best system we've got.
Absolutely, it's the best in the world. It's not just the one we have, it's the best in the world. And it's the government's job and their burden to prove the case beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And then sometimes it just doesn't happen. And this is a case where it just didn't happen, and the jury took the time, followed the law, and voted their conscience, and the verdict was not guilty.
And I know that legal analysts are going to dissect this case, the jury's decision, any subsequent interviews they do. If you're not familiar with the way the court system works, there's a process called voir dire. And basically what they do is they go through a process of selecting the jury. In this case, it was done in Tampa because they were afraid there was too much pretrial exposure. Too many people in the Orlando area knew about it, so they went to another community to try and find impartial jurors. So it's going to be interesting to see what jury analysts, John, want to know from the impact of this case and how it will affect the way lawyers choose jurors in capital murder cases in the future.
Absolutely. These 12 jurors made one decision, 12 other jurors would make a different decision. I know the state took issue with number 4 and preserved some rights with regard to juror number 4. It was a Catholic woman who said that she could never find the death penalty. And so there's still some appeal happening. There's still a lot, but absolutely, at the end of the day, and I try more civil cases than I do criminal, but regardless of which side, anybody that thinks, any psychologist or lawyer that thinks they can pick a jury and guarantee a victory or even 75% of an anticipated verdict is just wrong. You never know what a human mind's going to do. And
I think everybody's going to sit back and they're going to be in agreement that given the fact that the little girl lost her life, there may never be justice for Caylee, and that weighs heavily on a family, on a community, and those who follow this case. It does, and it begs the question:
if in fact Casey didn't do this, which one of her friends or family or ex-boyfriends did it? There's still justice remaining for Caylee. I appreciate Jose Baez's commentary, but if this is true, her murderer is still out there because clearly she didn't die in a swimming pool.
Now, I know that there can't be a case of double jeopardy, but the fact of the matter is when you have a capital murder case, there's no closure either. The investigation can be ongoing. How does that impact what happens from here?
There's not going to be an ongoing investigation. I have that in clients all the time. If I'm found not guilty, what are they going to do next? They're not going to do anything because they believe you did it. And it's not necessarily who did this to her, but what happened, what really happened. That's the question that I would be asking them.
And surprised because we know the facts and we put in absolutely every piece of evidence that existed.
Capital murder cases in the future.
Absolutely. These 12 jurors made one decision, 12 other jurors would make a different decision. I know the state took issue with number 4 and preserved some rights with regard to juror number 4. It was a Catholic woman who said that she could never find the death penalty. And so there's still some appeal happening. There's still a lot, but absolutely, at the end of the day, and I try more civil cases than I do criminal, but regardless of which side, anybody that thinks, any psychologist or lawyer that thinks they can pick a jury and guarantee a victory or even 75% of an anticipated verdict is just wrong. You never know what a human mind's going to do.
And I think everybody's going to sit back and they're going to be in agreement that given the fact that the little girl lost her life, there may never be justice for Caylee, and that weighs heavily on a family, on a community, and those who follow this case.
It does, and it begs the question: if in fact Casey didn't do this, which one of her friends or family or ex-boyfriends did it? You know, there's still justice remaining for Caylee. I appreciate Jose Baez's commentary, but if this is true, her murderer is still out there, because clearly she didn't die in a swimming pool.
Now, I know that there can't be a case of double jeopardy, but the fact of the matter is, when you have a capital murder case, there's no closure either. The investigation can be ongoing. How does that impact what happens from here?
There's not going to be an ongoing investigation. I have that in clients all the time. If I'm found not guilty, what are they going to do next? They're not going to do anything because they believe you did it. And it's not necessarily who did this to her, but what happened, what really happened. That's the question that I would be asking them. Unfortunately, we're never going to know what really happened. But the investigation's over. State Attorney's Office, law enforcement, they're not doing anything to further this investigation. They think it was Caylee Anthony. Jury said it. You didn't prove it. It's over.
And you know what? This is real life. This is not Law and Order. This is not CSI. There are so many unsolved murder cases that are on the books. In fact, perhaps, John, more than they're solved.
Absolutely. And Jacksonville's up there in the rankings with regard to murders, unfortunately, and how many high profile. I mean, Richard handles many more than I do, and he only handles, you know, the entire criminal bar here only handles a percentage because most of them just go unnoticed.
Mary, I'm going to toss it back to you in the other studio, bring Jay and Janet back into the fold. I'm curious what they think about Judge Belvin Perry's handling of this case. He maintained firm control, he made sure that there was decorum, and he made sure that they followed the letter of the law.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. And Bruce is mentioning, Jay and Janet, that Judge Belvin Perry, his professionalism in handling this case, how he maintained composure in the courtroom, and how he handled this case. Both of you, what is your opinion? I know, Jay, you mentioned that you've met Judge Perry.
I have, and I noticed that from the very beginning. People recall the O.J. case.
Yeah.
Maybe this is second in line behind O.J.
Very
now
memorable.
in famous cases in our country. But in O.J., there was a lot of criticism of the judge. You can argue whether that was appropriate or not. But this judge, from minute one, and I have had the honor of meeting him, he's handled it professionally. He's held the lawyers in check. I actually thought that at one point he might even hold him in contempt, but he made his points clear. I had the honor of meeting him when he came to Jacksonville to look at some of the things that we were doing here in the 4th Judicial Circuit. Very professional judge. His duty was to make sure this trial was appropriate for the state, that the state got a fair trial, the defense got a fair trial, and that those jurors were looked after, and he did an excellent job.
And he's the chief judge.
He is the chief judge, so he's their Judge Moran.
Exactly.
And very respectful, I thought, to both sides. You know, just even-handed, kind of has a nice demeanor, always a little bit of a smile on his face, so it's kind whenever he's even scolding them. It doesn't come across like he's mad. He just seems like he's being firm.
And not judgmental either way, which is his job. Correct.
Right. Well, even when you read the jury instructions, it is a little bit thrilling to hear them read the instructions and go through the rights that you have in this country. And he really kind of enumerated them beautifully and explained to the jury, no one has a right to break the law, but you have to follow these laws I'm giving you. And it came across really nicely when he did it.
And he didn't, some people might wonder whether a judge is going to play to the media. We've heard a lot about media coverage. No way did he play to the media. He played to the courtroom. He was in charge of the courtroom.
Is that part of what Judge Ito did, as I'm trying to recall, with right? Wasn't that part of the criticism, right? I know, showing our age.
I think as lawyers, you have to be very careful to be critical of judges. I think ethically, you respect the robe, even if you don't respect the person in the robe. But certainly at the time of the O.J. case, there were those that thought that Judge Ito was playing to the media.
Well, and you go back to what Cheney Mason said. I mean, we live in an era where judges are known by their first names. You know, Judge Judy, judges are on TV now, and this doesn't look like a judge who's trying to parlay this into a career after this.
He won't have a book.
Right, right.
But you've got to wonder what's going to happen after this with this story. Are we going to be seeing movies? Are we going to be seeing, you know...
I mean, we all want to know what the truth is, so I guess the question is there someone out there who knows what happened, and are they going to speak up? You know, I think someone had said, are they going to be looking for the killer now? You know, does this leave open what did happen, and are they going to be trying to find that out? But, you know, jurors, I guess, are always tempted to talk about what happened in the room.
One interesting thing that I've been thinking about, and would have to check the law on this, but the question is whether Miss Anthony can profit from this or not. Many will remember the old Son of Sam laws. There is a Son of Sam law in the state of Florida that talks about the inability to profit from committing a crime. Well, you were found not guilty of the murder. You were found guilty of some lying in the investigation. Is she still capable, if she wants to, of going and writing a book and profiting from it? That's something we'll hear about.
Well, and OJ, right, had the civil case, and I was thinking, Jay, now that you're on the civil side, I don't know who would sue her civilly, but that's what happened after the OJ acquittal. Yeah.
Here's the difference, though, that nobody probably cares from a family perspective.
What about the release of these videos and the photographs? Was there anything exchanged? Do we have any way of knowing that that she may have profited? She couldn't have profited from
I think she did. That was the word, was that she had, I think she made $90,000 when she was out on bail, and that's how she paid Jose Baez. So I think her answer was, like, I'm not doing this to profit, I'm doing this to hire a lawyer.
To defend myself.
Right,
okay.
right.
And she'd probably do the same thing. I'm doing it to pay my bills. I've been in prison for 3 years. I need the money. But, you know, we'll see. There'll be a lot more discussion about this case from every avenue imaginable, to answer your first question.
You know that. Absolutely. Bruce?
Yeah, you know, I think the fact of the matter is that this young woman is going to remain under great scrutiny. John, you said kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think you're right on. TMZ is going to have a camera on her. I mean, she has a reputation for being a party girl, for dating a lot of different people, for not exercising the best judgment. And there's going to be cameras out there, reporters out there. We live in a tabloid society, people who are looking for her to make some sort of a misstep.
Absolutely, and the general public is going to be out there looking. You know, they're going to, the cell phone picture alone of her holding any alcoholic beverage in the world for the next week is worth, you know, several thousand to tens of thousands of dollars. And this is the world of media where we can take pictures and do whatever in an instant. And she is as hot of a name as anybody in the country right now. I wouldn't want to trade places with her for many reasons right now at all.
And you know what, you know, had she not been the subject of such public scrutiny now, some of the pictures that have been posted, you know, of her being a party girl, her dancing, semi-nude or what have you know, they mimic what we see on Facebook so often for college kids and high school kids these days. But because of the circumstances surrounding her life, it's a much different world for Caylee Anthony. She has to watch her step.
Oh, she does, because like you mentioned tabloids and magazines and books, we talk about bias. Oh, they're going to be all over her. We're going to hear numerous articles, numerous magazines, no matter what it is, tabloids are going to be all over her. There's going to be all kinds of offers for her to give an interview. People are going to want to hear from her. And the amazing thing is people are going to either love her or hate her, but that's what's going to sell the magazines.
And people are going to want to hear from the jurors, too. It's 3:08. I've just been told from the people who are in the courtroom that some of the jurors may come out and speak publicly. We did hear from the jury forewoman, and I guess it's a foregone conclusion. And I think Judge Perry mentioned this. The booking agents are already out there, and pending what the verdict was going to be, they're going to be all over the morning shows, the evening shows, and what have you. If you could sit down with the jurors and ask them one question, what would it be?
One question. You know, I don't know. I mean, there's so many questions in this case. To try to narrow it down to one question in this case. Me, as a defense lawyer, I'd want to know, what was the closest thing to making you think guilty? What was there that had you thinking, well, maybe I missed? Was there something you thought I missed, but you managed to come to terms with it on your own? That's what I would want to know.
John, would you want to know whether or not there was any disharmony in the deliberation room, or if everybody from the get-go pretty much seemed on the same page?
Clearly they did. I mean, clearly they were pretty much on the same page to have a verdict done in 8 to 10 hours worth of deliberation, as was said by many people along the way. This was a tight-knit group, despite the fact there was 20, you know, that boiled down to 12. This group had synergy, and it was whether, you know, where they were going to go with this, and there was clearly some leaning early on. But, you know, my question would, if I were the state, is, you know, where did I go wrong? What was that link that I didn't make? You know, did you need DNA or fingerprints? Because this was one of the best circumstantial cases I've ever seen.
And the reality is, you know, we are set to be tried, if we ever find ourselves in court, by a jury of our peers. And some people sit back and they wonder whether or not the jurors take their charge very seriously. And it's amazing because they do adopt this demeanor and understand that somebody's life or death is at stake, and they take that responsibility very seriously.
Oh, absolutely. And in a case of this magnitude, you know that they did. Because first, we started with death qualifying them in the first place. So we're talking your decision, the things that you're listening to and paying attention to. At the end of the day, that prosecutor is going to stand up and ask you to not only convict her for first-degree murder, that man's going to stand up, look you in the eye, and ask you to return a recommendation, a vote and a recommendation that we execute her. And so that's something they obviously took very, very serious. And one thing that we haven't really touched on is because they were sequestered and they were together so long, they build mentioned the word synergy. The groups get to know each other. Yeah, they get to know each other. They already start, they're not allowed to talk about the case, but they're already getting to know each other. So when they go in the back and it's 8 to 10 hours over the course of a couple of days, they already know each other well. And so the conversations should go relatively smoothly, and obviously it did to resolve in the period that it did.
But there's some people who are going to sit back and say, okay, they've been holed up in a hotel for 33 days. Yeah. You know, they really haven't had any contact with their families. It was a holiday weekend. We know that one of the jurors has a cruise that they're supposed to leave on the 7th.
That's right.
You know, does that play into it at all, or you just hope not?
It does. It's human nature. It can't not. And we know as trial lawyers that you're dealing with 6 to 12 humans here, and their schedules and their lives, and they want to get home, and that's a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You know, Mayor, let's bring Jay and Janet back into the fold. Let's pose this question. You're one of the attorneys. Mm-hmm. Trial said and done. The verdict has been rendered, which is, of course, is history right now. And you could ask Caylee Anthony one question and not worry about the implications of that answer. What would it be?
Bruce wants to know if you were able to ask Caylee Anthony one question. Now that it's all said and done, what would it be?
Well, I was going to say, depends on which side.
As a person who spent 23 years prosecuting, who felt that the state had proved its case, obvious question is, why did you do it?